Good evening. My name is Dr. Wendy Robinson. I am proudly the superintendent of the Fort Wayne Community Schools. And welcome to an evening with Dr. Michael Fullan and collaborators. Those of you who know me, whenever you give me a script, that's just giving me license to change it. So I was supposed to be beginning with introductions. But in case you haven't figured it out, this is Jennifer McCormick, State School Superintendent. And I did not want to miss an opportunity to let her say a few words because she came because what we're doing here with Dr. Fullan and his collaborators is so important. We're talking about how we're going to collaborate to make this go deeper than just Fort Wayne Community Schools. So the reason I'm standing here this way is I didn't bring her a mic.
So this is classic. This is one of the favorite moments of my state superintendency, is to be hooked to Wendy Robinson. It's awesome. So I first want to say thank you for having me here tonight in Fort Wayne. You are doing, oh, look at that. I kind of liked it the other way, though.
Yeah, I did too.
So there went my moment. But I want to thank Fort Wayne for the invitation to come here this evening. First of all, to the educators in this room, thank you for what you do. You are truly the professionals that do amazing work every day with amazing people, the students that we serve. So thank you. To the school board members who are here supporting it, we cannot do this work without you. Dr. Fullan, what an amazing partner for Fort Wayne, and hopefully we can stretch out across the state. But most importantly, I want to thank Dr. Robinson. You have no idea, and many of you do have an idea about how blessed you are to have such a great leader and a great community leader in your district. So to Dr. Robinson, congratulations on your many years of service. But to all of you here this evening, thank you for the work that you're doing. Parents, thank you for that support that you give us. You are truly amazing people, and you are blessed to be in such a great community. So thank you, and I'm looking forward to a wonderful evening with all of you.
Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so I'll shave a couple of minutes off the intro because we are here tonight to communicate. I was going to say listen, but you don't have a conversation with Michael Fullan and his collaborators without having to respond back. So my job was to read the bios, and I can do that, but I just need to simply phrase it this way. Dr. Fullan has written books that make sense to educators, and everything that we've done in the Fort Wayne Community Schools is linked to a book that he's written. So just get on his website, and he has all those books. We've read them all. John Pierce was reminding me I gave him every last one of them when he became a board member. With Dr. Fullan this evening is Mag Gardner. Mag is like our new taskmaster here in Fort Wayne Community Schools. QIT members, we know Mag. She keeps us focused. But what we've appreciated so much, she's the consultant that connects it to the work. And I've said to them, and teachers, take credit for this. I've said this to my board. The teachers in this district have connected to the deep learning faster almost than the administrators because it makes sense to the work you have to do every day. And Mag is here to help us do that. Thank you, Mag. Joanne Quinn was here with us too for QIT. You remember her too. Joanne has co-authored books with Dr. Fullan, and I've said to her and Dr. Fullan, the Bible for us is breakthrough and coherence is really the one that has set us down the path. So I could read a lot about bios, but I just need you to know why they're here. So the message tonight is, what about this deep learning work? Why is that important for us? And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Michael Fullan. And I'm told not to hug him and smudge him. I'm just supposed to get off the stage.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
Get it.
Yeah, come on.
Oh,
Okay.
Thank you so much.
We can linger a while, you know.
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
That's not inappropriate.
Thank you very much, everybody, for the invitation. I was backstage talking to the student advisors before I came on, and we had a good discussion. They had questions, and they were all compatible. And then when we finished, one of the students said to me, "Good luck out there." And I thought, Does she know something about the audience that I don't know? I'm sure you're good luck for me. I hope I'm good luck for you. We have been working with school systems for quite a long time, but we turned a corner 5 years ago where we said the regular work is not keeping up with what is needed. And people have a sense of that a change is needed, but they don't know exactly what it should look like. They know there should be change for sure. So in our usual way, we broke into this through partnerships with school systems in 8 countries, but a lot of in North America. And it's these partnerships where, and I do mean it's two-way street, we are learning more from practitioners than they're learning from us, except once we learn a lot from practitioners, we start telling others, and we get credit for that, even though it's coming from the field still, we're the conduit. So I really feel there's no way of defining who did what other than we know it's in the right direction. So in this evening, and there's going to be 4 or 5 questions afterwards that some people have prepared, and we'll be glad Joanne will join me and Wendy, and we'll do that. But I want to take you through the short version of the key ideas. And if you see, we ended up calling this initiative New Pedagogies for Deep Learning. It was kind of an awkward title, but then people started to use it too much and we couldn't claw back on it. And we really didn't have a substitute title. So NPDL is our label for what I'm going to share with you. And I'll do it in a fairly brief way, about half an hour. But we'll get the pictures we have on our website that you see there, tons of videos, increasingly coming from you because you're video oriented and you're doing lots and there's lots to record. So let's start to take a look at what's here. I want to start with the problem. And the problem is that things in the world, almost everywhere we look, are getting worse rather than better. You could take climate change, you could take inequality, distribution of money, a lack of trust, undercutting cohesion. There's a lot of uneasiness in the world, a lot of anxiety about the future. And I would say students experience that or feel that with more sensitivity in some ways that we do because they're young. And there's 2 reasons why that they feel that way. One is they're going to inherit what is being created, and what is being created is not good enough by a long shot. So they're worried about having to inherit that. Secondly, they don't have any strong commitment to the status quo. So they're fabulous change agents if we can organize and mobilize them. And then they can begin to make a difference. And I can say this truthfully, we have not found a student young enough who's not a change agent. That students have the best ideas, and they have to be mobilized, they have to be interacted with others so that these ideas are sorted out. And that's exactly what we're doing. So I'll give you a graph in a moment. Traditional schooling is boring, mostly. I don't even feel like I have to think of that as a criticism. It is what it is. The school system that we have is not much change for 150 years. Inequity is widening in the society and in schools. That this is something we work in California, we work a couple of states here, we're working in Ontario, in Australia, New Zealand, all of those places. Even Finland is concerned about most of these issues, and they've been doing fairly well. I've already said the world is troubled. I can give you chapter and verse on that. It's not a pretty picture. It's not getting better. And one of the saviors of the direction, the reversal of the direction, is to get education, which is more likely to help solve problems, to create citizens that from the day that they begin start to do that. And most citizens say, or most teachers and then students say to us, and John Dewey first said it 100 years ago, education is not preparation for life, it's life itself. That's what his instinct was. And now students are saying, I don't want to wait for 10 years to become a citizen. I want to become a citizen of tomorrow, today. So let's get going. And that gets us into the deep learning, showing the promise that we know is there. Here's a depressing graph. And I could, from 20 different studies, give you such a graph. This is Lee Jenkins, one of our colleagues, and he asked teachers, thousands of teachers, different grade levels, what percentage of your students are engaged in learning? on the average? What do you think? And this is what they said. They said at the beginning, kindergartners, all the excitement after they get over the trauma of getting into school to begin with, they begin to enjoy themselves. And then you see, and this is not a criticism, this is just kind of because the education is outdated, because we haven't done deep learning soon enough, this is what happens. So you get down to grade 8 or 9 and you've got 37%. Another researcher at Stanford University, Heather Mellon, she wrote a book recently called The Purpose of Schooling. And it's depressing. And it's well written. It's exciting in some ways because of the possibilities. But what they've been doing is studying what youth that usually age, let's say, 12 to 20. And their overall finding at the end of the day is the following. When they studied grade 11 and 12 students who were on the road to graduate from high school, and they dug about purpose, what's your purpose? Most of the answers they got were superficial, I would say. They were saying, oh, I want to get good grades, go to a good university, and make some money. That was sort of it. And then when they really tried to study and get beneath it, she said and concluded, only 24% of the students had any sense of purpose about life, about education. That's sad, 24%. And this is because it's not that they don't have the purpose in them. It's not that you can't unlock it. It's just that it's not being unlocked because of this. And again, we don't think of it as a criticism. We think of it as the reason to do something about it. And because the uptake is so fierce, positively, we start slow to go back, to go forward and go fast. But really, it is a bit of a start slow because people say, well, how do we do this? How does it relate to regular schooling and grades? And they get a whole bunch of questions, and then they get the action 3 months later, and then it takes off and it accelerates. So that's what we're seeing. Ultimately, we want to redefine schooling as helping people be good at life and good at learning. So good at learning, the way learning, a lifelong learner, you'll see how we use the 6 C's that way. Good at life means that they're doing something that's applied to life while they're learning, so they get better. I sometimes ask rhetorically, I say, could a student go through all the grade levels and graduate at the end of high school and go to university, for that matter, and still not be good at life? Well, you know the answer to that. Being good at school is not the same as being good at life. Deep learning means, actually, you're good at school and you're good at life simultaneously. That's exactly what it means in the bottom line. So we've done, Joanne and I, in our work over the years, have become to really try to solve problems of system change. And those problems come from, we did tons of workshops, and still do, to get at what's the best way of getting at this. And one of the powerful concepts we have is coherence. And it seems obvious at first, except a lot of people, what they were doing, they were aligning things. So you had the vision and the strategy, and sometimes you'd have the professional learning, and it's tied into the investments and the measurement and that. And all of that was oh so rational, except it didn't work rationally. It never really clicked for most teachers and students. And so we said, well, that kind of alignment is rational, in fact, but it's not really what we see. And a better word for this is coherence. And I want to just pinpoint the coherence definition. This was our book. We call it The Right Drivers because we were looking at policies that weren't working. And we said, these are wrong policies. And if you go on our website, there's a paper called Choosing the Wrong Drivers for Whole System Reform. And so the wrong policies were sometimes too much technology without thought behind it, sometimes the wrong kinds of standardized tests, sometimes individualistic solutions rather than collaborative solutions, sometimes too many policies, initiativitis, if you can learn how to say that. But initiativitis is way too many ad hoc policies coming and not being coordinated. So we wrote the book, and this is what we came up with, the coherence framework. You'll see it has only 4 quadrants to it. This is taking a lot of ideas, and we like to simplify things, but not oversimplify it. We call it simplexity. Not a real word, but a real concept. Simplexity means you boil it down to a small number of key things, usually fewer than 5, and then you make those things gel. That's the complex part. They really feed on each other. So think of this as not steps 1, 2, 3, 4 around the clock, but as the pulsating heart. 4 chambers in the heart. Blood has to flow in and out of those chambers in order for the person to be healthy to live. If one of the chambers gets damaged, you die. Same with the organization. If one of these 4 quadrants is weak, the organization can't function effectively. So practically speaking, and remember I said, we have learned this in combination with systems. So we say 80% of our best ideas come from leading practitioners. That's how we got to this part. So I'm going to take you through this as we introduce deep learning as quadrant 3. But let's take focus. Focus is not just about having the goals and the vision. It's about having, you'll see there, clarity of strategy and change leadership. It's having people who say, yeah, we know the goals, or we think we do, and we've agreed on them, but the real trouble and the real need for focus is to get it into action, to get the mobilization. So I want to take a couple of minutes. I won't ask you to answer this, but you could do this on your own, but just to get into the problem. What this says, and we do this in workshops, we say moral purpose, and Wendy referred to the original book called Breakthrough, which had the triple P. The moral purpose was the center part of it, but the 3 Ps were having to do with precision and professional learning and development. And think of these 4 questions. What's my moral purpose as a teacher, or as a leader in the system, or as a student for that matter? What actions are we taking to move ahead, and so on? In Ontario, when we started this system work in earnest for the whole system, in 2003, we had 3 goals, which we called moral purpose. Increase literacy and numeracy in high school graduation. A cluster, that's goal 1. A cluster is get better. We have 5,000 schools. So we said, these schools are flatlined on literacy, numeracy, high school graduation. How do we move the system? So we took that on. Second, we said, raise the bar and close the gap, which means that everyone has to move forward, and those that are farther behind have to move forward faster, upward this way. So that was our second goal, the moral purpose of closing the gap. And our third goal was to increase the public's appreciation of the public education system. And we measured all 3 of those, and we did well. And then this got us into building capacity at the school level. So when it came to time to say, is this enough to have high school graduation, where we said it's not enough, how are we going to do this? But still, moral purpose has to be the driver for teachers individually and collectively. And sometimes I ask rhetorically, what if you have well, let's put it this way. Let's say you're a teacher in a school, or teachers in a school, and the school's not improving, and it's 3 or 4 or 5 years. And if you ask teachers, can all students learn? If you just ask that question any day of the week, I would say that the vast majority of teachers would say, yeah, all students can learn. But then if you're in a school where they're not learning, what's going on here? They're not learning. I have to believe that deep down those teachers don't really believe that all students can learn if their students aren't learning. And yet they're not lying. They deceive themselves as well. There's a lot of issues here, and I never stop to think of it that way. So when you stop and think about it, and you ask the question, and let's say it's not happening, and we want to do something about it, how do you change a teacher who doesn't deeply believe that these particular kids can learn? They're not out saying they'll never learn, they're just that it's not happening. And I'll say 2 ways that you can't change them, or that won't work, and this is just to get into the change thinking. One way is to say, one thing that doesn't work is research knowledge. We've got lots of research knowledge that show schools that are successful that are exactly like other schools demographically. Resources. But there's a difference. Some are succeeding, some aren't. That's not convincing. I'll tell you why in a moment. The second thing that doesn't work is increased moral exhortation. You get what that means, right? You talk about moral purpose, but you talk about it more loudly and more frequently. You exhort people to do it. It's for the kids. Now, these don't work. And the reason they don't work is the first one says it should be done. The second one says the first one says it can be done, I should say, the research, it can be done. Second one says it should be done. Neither of them tell you how to do it. So how do you change? And you change by giving teachers new experiences in relatively non-judgmental situations where they're helped to teach differently, to get different results. And then when they start to get those results, they want to do more and more. You change it with your peers doing that. And this is what deep learning does. It changes it because it grabs hold of this. It doesn't dwell or stay on the moral exhortation level. It gets to the action level. How about the question, can all teachers learn? Can all principals learn? The answer better be yes, even though it's not literally true for everybody all the time. By and large, it's just a human enterprise, and it's important. And if you do the right combination of things and people start to get success, they can't wait to do more. And this is our goal in deep learning. Can't wait to do more. Coherence, we define, Joanne and I defined it this way, and it's an important definition. The shared depth of understanding about the nature of the work. Notice this, shared depth, understanding, nature of the work. You can't get this through a workshop. You can't get this through a speech or through a vision statement because note the shared purpose here. You can only get this one way, I think, and that's by people working together over time where they interact and they develop their sharedness in explicit terms. That's where it comes from. And another way of putting this is that this change in the culture towards coherence is what occurs in between workshops. Not at the workshops, there can be input there, but the day-to-day. And we've changed the day-to-day culture of schools. Teachers are doing different things. They're interacting differently. Leaders are enabling it differently. Schools are learning from each other. Even districts are learning from each other. If you go statewide, that will be what will happen with this one. Fort Wayne will be part of districts that are learning about each other. And the peers are the peers, whether it's two students working together, or teachers working together, or two schools, or a district working with another district. Peers are where the power of learning occur. So the shared depth of understanding. This is another good way of expressing it. A lot of people talk about alignment. We've aligned this and that's a good thing. Alignment, the problem with that is it's rational. If there's one thing I know about change after 40 years, it's not a rational enterprise only. This is why people get frustrated who are leaders. I'm right, I know I'm right. Well, guess what? Being right is not a strategy for change. Being right is not sufficient. It's not a strategy for change. What is a strategy for change is when you tap into people's emotions. So that change that works is because it's made an emotional connection. In our deep learning, we call it sticky learning because it stays with you for a long time if it's done the way we're talking about it. And when it stays with you for a long time, you know it's because it's been an emotional connection. All the stuff about brain connection right now is the emotional take-up. And of course, that kind of change can be negative. If you're treated poorly, if you have a life of tragedy, you are affected emotionally by those changes. But now we're talking about the positive changes of learning. They're equally powerful on the positive side, and so we are striving for coherence making, and that coherence making is when more than a combination of people are on the same page, and we call it talk the walk. They know what they're doing, they can describe it to each other, they do it better, they can tell when it's working. So that's what led us into collaborative cultures. We said collaborative cultures, and here's an interesting question or comment. We used to think that collaboration was automatically a good thing. Now I'm pretty sure the answer to it is collaboration is not automatically good. You can collaborate to do nothing. You can collaborate to do the wrong thing. So we're not in love with collaboration for the sake of it. It's when you collaborate for very specific qualities and get the results. So we literally sort it out. In fact, if I was in a group that was a poor collaboration, I'd rather work alone. I'd rather work alone than work with people that were not going to be able to be helpful in combination. But what we are doing in our broader research as well as coherence is we have, with other researchers on the same track, whittled down the meaning of collaboration so that you end up with the essence of the successful change that we're talking about. An interesting study 5 years ago that the Boston Consulting Group did, sponsored by the Gates Foundation. They called it What Teachers Know Best was the name of the report. And they had studied what teachers think about professional learning and what principals did, et cetera. This is what they found. Very intriguing, actually, when you say it the way I'm going to say it. They found that principals liked PLCs. PLCs are professional learning communities. Principals liked PLCs better than teachers liked them. Think about that for a while. Why is that the case? Why didn't teachers love PLCs? Because a lot of them were done superficially, because they were done by the administrators, because the partnership was never evolved with the teachers to be ownership. Now we have partnerships with students that make it even stronger. So the collaborative cultures have to be of a certain kind. And I want to take you, and don't worry about the statistics here, but I want to take you into something that's pretty profound. Some of you, or all of you in the education business, will know John Hattie. About 12 years ago or so, he came out with what he called visible learning. And he took the teaching practices that teachers did, feedback to students and participation of parents and metacognition, all those things. And he calculated through looking at reams of studies across the world, which of these practices were having an impact on student learning. So he had the data. And he double-checked the data. It was all aggregated and analyzed. And he used a statistical method called coefficient effect sizes. And his guideline for effect sizes was anything below 0.40 is not very impressive. And it starts to get statistically significant at 0.40, but not substantially significant unless you go, in a sense, above 1. So that's the guideline. And what he did because we have known him and worked with him, I said to him about 8 or 9 years ago, I said, that brought pedagogy or teaching out of the open. This is great. We want to do, people haven't been talking about it that way. They've been talking about it too generally. So this has been very helpful. But, I said, that what your measures are, they're all individual measures of individual teachers. We happen to know that collaboration has greater potential. What do you think about that? And he said, I think you're probably right, but we haven't looked at the research. So he said, we will look at the research. So he did that. Here's the result. Remember the effect sizes look at his effect sizes. They're all below 1.0. Usually, some of them are negative, by the way, teaching that does more harm than good. But some of them get into the plus side. They're 0.20, 0.40, et cetera. Collective efficacy, which I'm going to define in a minute, entirely along the lines of deep learning, was a 1.57, a whopping impact. The lesson here is if you can get teachers to work together when they're well-led and they're focused and it's specific, you will produce results that we've never seen before. This is proof positive from his big statistical research. He defines collective efficacy similarly to the way that we would. And these are the 4 things. All 4 are essential. One is the shared belief that teachers have in this school that's doing it, that we will be successful. We have high expectations, we know, because we know the other 3 things that are on this list. Second, we're always looking at evidence of impact, and when we find impact, we keep that. When we find not impact, we are less committed to it. And then thirdly, we have a culture of collaboration. These are his words, not ours, but we could have written this. Culture of collaboration to implement the teaching strategies have the most impact, which is deep learning strategies, by the way. And then, big one on leadership. The big finding, the single finding about leadership, and this applies to all of you, whatever your leadership role might be in or out of education. The leaders who do best participate as learners, that's the key phrase, working with those that they work with to come up with a solution. They participate as learners. And this is what we've seen in the case of schools doing this development. So if we look at this long list, I'm not going to dwell on it, but one of the new things that's coming out in the research is that people are starting to look at what they call positive outliers. And a positive outlier is, in this case from research in California, are, in this case, school districts that are more successful than other school districts working with the same kind of demographics and resources. So comparing apples with apples. And you don't need to look at this or dwell on this 9 list, but we could have written this from our deep learning. This research you can look up. Researchers are at the Stanford, at the Learning Policy Institute. And all of these things, please don't think of 1, 2, or 3 are getting somewhere. It's better to do nothing than to do partial in some ways. But this dynamic interaction of the 9 things, and this proof that some districts, and these districts are named in the research, that some districts are doing wonderfully, and they're doing so because they have figured it out. They have brought together the factors that go together. Here's another piece of research just to reinforce what I've done, and then we'll get to deep learning for the time we have left. This is Vivienne Robinson, who's a researcher in New Zealand, and she studied the principalship and said, what impact do principals have on student learning? We know it's indirect, but what do they do that causes it? And she took all that's called meta-research and bring it down to things, same effect sizes methodology that John used. And what she came up with, she said there are 5 things that are somewhat affecting for the better student achievement that principals do. And I want to say right off the bat, 4 of them are not very impressive. So, and this is important to know. It doesn't mean don't do them, but don't expect them to carry the day. So the 1, 2, 3, and 5 are not impressive. So principal who spends a little time establishing goals, necessary, but doesn't get you very far. Resourcing, yeah, we need some resources. Okay, that's helpful. Ensuring quality teaching is very interesting because this is the principal who says, how do we get better teachers on the staff? The reason this isn't powerful is that that's an individual strategy. You can get individuals into a culture. If the culture is not supportive, the culture will eat them up faster than you can produce them. This is why we combine individual, which is called human capital, with social capital, which is the quality of the group. Again, the collective efficacy that I just talked about. And then you see the 4th one, which was the only one that was impressive. This was leading teaching, learning, and development. This is the principal who participates as a learner with teachers, and that's the result they get because they're a learner. And we're getting to learn. This is safe for any kind of leadership, whatever part you're in, whatever part of the system. The same with the superintendent. The superintendent who participates as a learner is going to learn a lot, and they need to use that to have an impact. Again, I want to underscore the partnership nature of this. The CEO of Honeywell, when he retired, it was about 7 or 8 years ago, he was interviewed by a big magazine on his leadership style because he was very effective. And they said, what's the single most important thing you've learned about being a leader? And he said, the very most important thing, the one thing that stands out for me as a leader, was he said, when you approach anything like this, he said, it's better to be right at the end of the meeting than just at the beginning of the meeting. That was his metaphor. In other words, when you're right at the beginning of the meeting, you're right in your own mind only. When you're right at the end of the meeting, and the meeting is a metaphor, of course, is that you're right because you've learned. By the end of that, and you come out the other end, so to speak, sorting it out because you've learned in that relationship. So we can't get away from the notion that leadership has to be in there, has to be participating, has to be learning with the staff. We get then to this being a lead up to really figure out in depth the deep learning. Deep learning, we've captured this. Our 2 books on deep learning that came out each of the last 2 years are the result of the last 5 years, and they're co-productions from the field. They're not us sitting in the laboratory writing about them. We're extracting them while we're doing them by others. So the first one is about capturing the engage the world, change the world. This one is the tools for engagement, which is operationalizing it more. And I'll tell you a little bit about this. So on the first one, if you notice, the subtitle was Engage the World, Change the World. This came straight, I would say, almost from the mouths of teachers and students. That when we started to work with this and do the deep learning, they were working on applied projects, they were getting results, they were doing the 6 C's that I'll show you in a few moments. And then they were realizing, we just gave them the label. And the label captured it, but was their experience. We said, what you're doing is engaging the world and learning about it, and you're doing that really because you want to influence it for the better. You want to learn about it, but you also want to change about it. And this is what they were doing in this work. So here's our purpose, to foster the deep learning across, in this case, the whole district here and more. And basically, again, we're doing this. The 700 teachers here who have participated with Meg and Joanne and others so far, in just the short time we've had with you, but the intense time, have been doing this. They've been identifying deepening learning, spreading it, getting deeper about it as well as more widespread. We've worked in these 8 countries. Hong Kong is going to fall off the map there, actually, given the things that are gone on there. But nonetheless, we have some schools there. And there's a lot of schools in each case. Uruguay is one of the stars. Uruguay is a very poor country, south of South America. A very poor country. It has about 3,500 schools. And they came in year 1 with 100 schools. Year 2, remember we were talking about the last 4 years. Year 2, 200 schools. Year 3, 400. Now year 5, 600 schools. And they're just flourishing. And if I wish I had time to show you their 12-minute video on this, which is just absolutely phenomenal. These are teachers who haven't done much by way of teacher preparation. These are students who are very poor. And they take to it like, I don't know, like amazingly. The articulation, one of the phrases we have is the ability to talk the walk. These students, and we have it dubbed in subtitles, these students are so precise in talking the walk about the changes that they have. The last one I saw was how they were short of water and said, how do we take rainwater? How do we figure out how to take water and make it usable? So they started to look at the gutters. They built a drone that flew over the roofs to see where the water was going. They built things to separate the dirt from the water. They had it all leveled. And these were students that over a period of a year. And the math they did, the communication, the participation, the energy, there was just no bounds. In fact, deep learning, one way of putting it, is that deep learning is economical, because the old boring deep learning was 9 till 3. The new deep learning is 9 to 3 plus another 5 hours, so you get almost twice the learning for the same price, if you want to put it in economic terms, because they are learning that much more. It's absolutely true. So building more, we've had a lot of this generation. We're not looking for quantity. Each of these, the price of admission, so to speak, is to say, I want to make a change, and I want to be a partner, and I want us in our district to be in control of it with you, and we want to move forward this way. So it works, but we're moving deep learning from the margins of practice. Sometimes we see that project-based learning, but it's only a small piece. We're moving it to the mainstream of everyday teaching. So that's one thing. Secondly, we have developed the 6 C's. I say develop because 4 of those C's were around undeveloped, I want to say it that way, and those were the last 4, collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. The so-called 21st century skills, they came out around, I think, 1995 or something. And they've gone hardly anywhere. How ironic, the 21st century skills sitting around for 20 years. Right? Creativity hasn't gone anywhere. Critical thinking a little bit, but nothing. It's not very impressive. Students are still bored with it. You add character and you add citizenship, and we have rubrics for all of these. We operationalize them. We have images of teachers and students doing this, explaining themselves, and mostly it's the students doing the talking. And we have these 6. We have the learning progressions around the 6 C's, so we can describe them, we can capture them. They capture the hearts and minds of students and teachers working with them. And these are, in one sense, the learning outcomes, even though they're part of the process of getting there. What causes this to move? And this is where we are getting into the motivation and the teaching methodology that I'll put on the screen in a moment. This is Ted Dintersmith, incidentally, who said this. And Ted did he's a philosopher, in a sense, and a movie producer, and a kind of gadfly millionaire, I want to call him. And so he produced a movie called Most Likely to Succeed, which was on High Tech High. And he had this movie, is quite good, it's a couple of years old. And what he showed basically was that only a very tiny margin of students are likely to succeed. And most of the action about reform, he said it this way, he said, is trying to make an obsolete system better. Most of the reform energy is going to make an obsolete system better. And then he actually wasn't impressed by even the good examples, because they were students striving for grades, and that was the end-all and the be-all. It wasn't this. And what he did, he spent a year going around, 52 weeks, remember the whole country, every state, macro level, state level, and micro level. And he said this is what he found. He said the exciting part, which was very much tiny in the minority, was when students got the unbridled enthusiasm once they were enabled to do something of the kind we're talking about. The energy, the passion, liberation. His words, our findings every time. Focus on the 6 C's. This is a neuroscientist is on our team now, Jean Clinton. She's coming here in February. I think she was there with some of you last week in Toronto. And Jean is fantastic, a Scottish mother and grandmother, actually, who's a neuroscientist, and she's got just a purchase on life that's fantastic. And this is what she said, because now she's inside our project. She's part of our project team. She said, when students experience the 6 C's, the way that you're doing it, she's talking to us, that experience immunizes them from further emotional difficulties, if that's what they're experiencing. It actually protects them from getting worse and can help them get better. This, in other words, it's deep learning to the rescue. These students were declining, and now she's seeing this, and that we're now building this image into it more. The actual working of it is the Deep Learning Center has 6 C's, and then the 4 things that are called the elements, you have the framework on your seat, are these 3. I won't actually, given the time we have, dwell on them. You can read about them in the book. You can talk about any of the teachers and students that are doing this. But these 4 are important because they're the smallest number again, but they cover the waterfront. You can't just have pedagogy. You can't just have instruction. You have to have partnerships with students and parents. You can't just have the traditional learning environment, the classroom. You have to be flexible. The world is the oyster. You can't just have technology. We have taken technology. We first of all called it a wrong driver. We said the main thing 5 years ago when we started that people did, their main strategy, guess what, for using technology, the main strategy 5 years ago had 3 letters, B-U-Y. You buy it. That's the strategy. More technology, the better. And those that could afford it tried to take a shortcut to the future by buying lots of it, and it was squandered, it was wasted. But now if you change the order around and you say pedagogy and learning is the driver, and technology is the accelerator, you've got the right causal sequence. And what we're able to do then is mobilize learning and then use technology proactively to really accelerate it. And all of the projects do well in technology. The students are great at it, better than most of us, but it's got to be this combination. And we take, if you take what surrounds this, there are 3 conditions, I'm going to say. School conditions are the collaborative culture, the collective efficacy. District conditions are what you're doing. Wendy and the senior staff and the partnership between the center and the schools, all of those things, the directors of schools, the school principals, the teachers, all of those things come together and they represent the district conditions at the school and district level to make this work. The 3rd level is what's happening at the system level, which is the state. And we haven't gone to the state. In Uruguay we did, because that's where the energy was. But in some ways, I like the middle being the hero. Leadership from the middle, the school districts being the strong hero. And another way of putting this is that we don't want the top to run the strategy. We want them to like it. Big difference. Because if they run it, it's top down. And the top changes, and you can't have any continuity. But if they like it, if they can get to like it, they start to see the system changes. And I can tell you we've seen them in California. This system in the last 6 years, policies have changed dramatically from a tighter, boring system to a more liberated, innovative system. We've documented it. You can go on my website, michaelfullan.ca. We're in California so much that I use the CA bilingually, Canada and California. And so you can see all the chapters and verse. We followed it. It's great. It's not finished, but it's all right direction. And they're starting to use technology. We have districts now working on this. So we also use a collaborative inquiry method that Mag and Max and Joanne have developed and mastered to make this come alive and develop. So here we're going to close down, then we're going to open up to some questions that we formulated. Here are some of the surprises. We call them emergent discoveries because they weren't in our list of objectives. They came out of the woodwork. We knew we were on the right track because things were working. And when they were really working, we saw them come to life. We said that helping humanity, students, once they get going almost every student has an instinct. The millennials who were born, I guess, up to the year 2000. They don't want to work for an organization that doesn't have any moral purpose. They're not individually selfish. The generation before them was more like that. But they're not. They want to make a difference. They want something that's meaningful in life. And when they see this opportunity to help humanity up close in their own community, or more broadly, they love it. Life and learning merge. I've said this, and quite a few of these. Character, citizenship, and creativity are catalytic. It means those 3 C's cause the other C's to ramify. We don't do all 6 C's, incidentally, if we're working with a school all at once. You can read about our success in Ottawa Catholic District, 83 schools. They started with 7 schools. They did deliberately move to 15, deliberately moved to all 83, and they're a going concern. They're fantastic. You can look at the Liberal. You saw some of them last week in Toronto. It's a whole system that's humming after 4 years of doing this. And the last one, which is just beginning to emerge, and I'm most excited about this from a moral purpose point of view, we have found, I'll leave this hanging, and I hope when we work together we can prove it in your case, that deep learning is good for all students. It's especially good for students that are underserved, disconnected, or alienated. Especially good. Instead of giving them drill work to add insult to injury, you give them deep learning and they flourish. They are hidden figures, and they actually flourish. Everyone flourishes, but these students have the more to go. So this is an incredibly important moral purpose to this. And then lastly, accountability, because I know the questions will come up around that. It's a tough one. It's the bugbear. Richard L. Moore in 2004 said, internal accountability is what the group feels when it's doing its work. And external accountability is what the state does. He said, no amount of external accountability will be successful in the absence of internal accountability. It just can't be done from the outside. So what you have to do is build up the inside, which we call it a culture of accountability. If it has transparency, if it has specificity, if it gets the judgmentalism right, that is not being too judgmental too quickly to seal off ideas. If it does this, then it begins to get results, and it's accountable, and then it likes to interact with the outside. Maybe it's critical of some of the directions of the policy, but it's also constructive because it starts to say, with the outside, we can now deal with the external framework. It's a tricky one, external accountability, getting this right. It'll come up in the questions, especially in Indiana. We want to talk to you about it, and we are going to predict that deep learning will allow you to navigate the next 4 years through the external accountability maze. It'll allow you to contend with that more effectively than just be on the receiving end. And then lastly, way of saying this, what I just said this a moment ago, when you achieve positive change of the kind we're seeing and we're documenting, it is exactly, almost exactly, I'd say 95%, it's exactly the same as accountability. Because if you're achieving what you're supposed to achieve, accountability is encompassed. And this is why we don't have to separate it so much. You have to use accountability for systems that aren't moving at all, so it gets into external things, but that starts to minimize. The amount of internal accountability and deep learning goes up, and the amount of external accountability and its prominent goes down. And you come this way, and you've got fully accountable, just like I've put it there. So this is the future. This is your future. And you can do it rapidly. It takes a year or so to get going, but then it accelerates, as I said, and within 3 or 4 years, this district can be 2 things. It can be a powerhouse across its 50 schools with this work, and it can be an influential change agent with other districts in the region or in the state. Thank you very much. Sit down? Okay. Front center?
We didn't rehearse this, so sit where you want.
Okay, I'll sit here. Closest chair. So we generated some questions from you, from some of the students and others, and Wendy's in charge of them, but we know what the questions are, I think. So where you go?
Don't spoil my Oprah moment.
Okay. Yes.
First of all, thank you. I think sometimes as educators, we're so busy trying to be accountable for everybody, we don't take the time to just stop and process how important this work is. So thank you for reminding us. Thank you. So the first question, how do you know that deep learning is having an impact? All of you talked about tonight.
Well, I'm not going to answer each question, and we're going to go back and forth. And since I've been doing all the talking, Joanne, why don't you kick it off? Yeah, go ahead.
I think there are a number of ways. I think the first one that we're seeing is just the engagement. It's just off the charts. As soon as students start having the opportunities to do things that are meaningful and relevant, they become more engaged with the work, they become more engaged with the school, but they also take that out into the rest of their lives. And it impacts attendance, it impacts retention rates for high school. So we're starting to see all of that. The second thing I think is in just the quality of the work. When you see, we have hundreds of examples of experiences that teachers are telling us about where students are doing things that are very impactful. They are able to articulate what they're learning, why they're learning it, how it's going to impact their own community, their own lives, and sometimes the whole global community. And I think the third thing that we're really seeing is that it's transforming the whole relationships in the learning process. It's the relationships of students and students to teachers and to their whole community. They have voice, they have agency, they feel empowered, they take risks, they're innovative, and they're proud. They're proud of what they're doing. And if we can build that sense of well-being and confidence, then that sets them up for life. And the other added bonus is that we're seeing a real transformation in teachers and how they see themselves. And it's not uncommon for us to hear teachers saying, you know, I was going to retire, but now this is so much fun, I'm going to stay for a little while. And they're also saying, this is the kind of work I always wanted to do. This is why I came into teaching and learning. And yet sometimes I felt confined because of external testing and all sorts of reasons. Teachers felt that they were in a narrow box. And now they see that there's so much potential, so that it's this transformation, the quality and the impact on kids' lives that I think really give us hope. And we gather those, we share them. Many of them on our websites. And I think when people see those examples, then they want to try it and do more.
You were part of our conversation this morning, and our board members were there. We live in Indiana. And while we can understand the impact, help us talk through how do you still survive in our Indiana accountability structure when this is actually the goal of education?
Right.
Well, the accountability is a juicy item for Indiana. So we don't want to drink the juice, but we do want to, we don't want to squeeze the juice out of it. It's a really tough one, especially if you try to change it. We have a good handle on it. I just want to be careful to take the 2 or 3 parts of it. Last week, as you know, we had Jal Mehta at the Deep Lab in Toronto from Harvard, a young sociologist who's been working on deep learning and other areas. He did a previous book to his In Search of Deep Learning book. Sorry, I'll get a bit connected. He did a massive study in search of deep learning across this country. This was 3 years ago. And he looked at all the examples of deep learning that were reported. And then when they went and did their field study, he was massively disappointed because he couldn't find any real examples. So he called his book In Search of Deep Learning, because he's still searching a bit. So that was one thing. But then he in his previous book, he always had a phrase that a conclusion about the teaching profession, that I wish I had written this phrase. It's so powerfully right. He said, policymakers, the problem has been they're trying to do with accountability at the back end what they should have done at the front end with capacity building. They should have done capacity building, and then we wouldn't have this damn problem. So teachers now become so alienated by the wrong-headed accountability that it actually does more harm than good. It actually does more harm. It's counterintuitive. The harder you strive to measure and have punitive things to it, the more that people freeze up or go off. And also the measures are not effective. So what we're working on is this. We know that the current measures are counterproductive. And there's a lot of evidence that shows that can give you 5 books that say that, empirically, research-wise. So we know that. But you then can't say, well, you can't go from the wrong accountability to no accountability. That's not acceptable. So what is good accountability? And we think that has to be taken seriously. And when we find policymakers looking more closely, in fact, some of them are now saying, we think we have been on the wrong track for the last decade. And we see the appeal to alternatives, and we're beginning to think that we're getting better results this way, so let's see some more. And so we have a whole new measurement system in California because of that, and they're making progress on the new measurement system. So it has to be recast. I happen to think that, I don't know what I think in kind of at the end of the day in some ways, because we do believe that if you do deep learning, that literacy does go up. And communication goes up. Other than that, math goes up because they're doing math naturally. So we think that there's a way of doing deep learning and meeting the traditional goals anyways, and people should be thoughtful about that. But the traditional goals, when they become too political, they lead to a pitched battle between the teachers and the policymakers. And it usurps massive emotional energy, an energy that could be, and it's not a battle worth winning in some ways, because it's not going to produce any results that we think or you would think, or most people would think would be valuable. So I think it's a conundrum right now, and I think we have to live with it. I think it's possible, and I know it's possible, to do deep learning, even if you have the standardized test. You're doing it. That's how we know it's possible. And you'll be better off for it in the deep learning sense, and you'll get better results, but you'll also be better off to contend with the standardized test and actually maybe even do well on some of them, and those tests will get more modern, I'm going to say. So I can't be too naive about it or optimistic and say ignore it, because I don't think it should be ignored. But I do think it's the battle that should be best fought with a strong offense, which is deep learning, and then with figuring out how to handle it so that some of the connections show you that the standardized tests benefit from the deep learning anyways, and that people become less preoccupied with only having standardized tests. It's a very bad weapon to get results because it simply doesn't work.
And the other thing you end up with is that you have built a whole set of competencies in addition to those that are traditionally measured on standardized testing. So in addition to how well you're doing on that, you also have kids that are deeper thinkers, better collaborators, communicators, and so on. So that it's a win-win if we do it well.
And those competencies, you know this, everybody knows this, they are what employers are asking for. Mm-hmm. They want team players, they want creative people, they want people who can communicate, they want people that have a sense of the world. All of those things that the, let's say, business wants are coming out of, they're built into deep learning. So it's got some allies as well.
And they've basically answered the last 2 questions, so we're not going to sit here and play Oprah anymore.
Okay.
But I just, we want to really wrap up the evening by kind of showing the community and also sharing with Dr. Fullan what it is that we think we are trying to start here and some of our examples. So if you could, please help me thank Dr. Fullan and our Joanne.
Thank you all.
You can just stay up here if you want to, or go back down.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, everybody.
That's why I have the crush. Because it makes sense, and that's all educators are asking for. We don't care how hard it is. Could you just make it make sense? Give me something I can use. So it was important for us as we've worked with the Deep Learning Network. We've seen examples from all over the country. And on page 161, this is how bad it is, people I haven't memorized. They have created what does deep learning look like? Because we call deep learning a lot of different things. But for us, if we're going to do it, let's just do it right. So what we've done is, and Steve Armstrong, you're there somewhere. He has just been absolutely phenomenal. We have pulled together our own deep learning video. So for most of you in the community, you've never seen it, and even the people here who work here haven't seen this. So we want to end, and I'll kind of wrap up at the end of it, with just showing you what we believe are examples of what we're trying to get to in this community.
My name is Wendy Robinson, and I'm proud to be the superintendent of the Fort Wayne Community Schools. Fort Wayne Community Schools has gained a reputation nationally for always focusing on the whole child, as expectations for what defines success keeps shifting.
The amount of investment that kids have with everything that we're doing, with learning how to use the technology that we're putting in their hands, as well as the hands-on materials and things that we are asking them to work with, really brings a new level of creativity and critical thinking to what they're doing. Likewise, the soft skills that they don't realize that they're getting, the way that they work together on a project, or the way that they think about the problems that might come up in the project that they're planning, the ways that they have to divide responsibilities and think about their timeline and the materials they have access to, has all just been something that's happened kind of organically, that we didn't really expect for them to happen. And just watching a variety of kids from all walks of life has really been interesting to see how they really latch on to this kind of autonomy.
Over the years, we have used the work of Dr. Michael Fullan and his collaborators to help us organize our work. Dr. Fullan's work focuses on the 6 C's: citizenship, character, communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. In this video, you'll see 3 examples of how teachers and students are taking the concepts of the 6 C's and turning them into action.
Our focus here at Adams Elementary School is on creating authentic learning experiences for our students. And one really cool way that we have decided to do that was this partnership with the Career Academy. I met with the instructional coach and we kind of brainstormed some different ideas, and one of our needs was creating a better space for our students out on the playground.
What I wanted was bigger equipment on our playground for bigger kids.
So our students, their first task was to write me a letter, and so I got letters through a scavenger hunt, I got letters just handwritten, I also got some emails from some students all asking for some new equipment.
We made stamps and envelopes and letters for Miss Holland, and we did like a scavenger hunt around the school, and we hid the things, and there was like clues to give her.
It was fun working with my group because we had a lot of different ideas, and if I was by myself, I wouldn't have thought of those ideas.
The fact that our students are, one, excited about being able to work with each other, but the prospect of being able to work with students at the Career Academy, a place where they can go and they can start making connections that, hey, yeah, I could totally do that when I get into high school. The fact that they're excited about that, and that they are going to be able to provide something to their community, because we are a neighborhood school. And so what we create outside on the playground, they can use no matter if we're in school or out of school.
What I like best in my group is I like to collaborate with them.
Now that we have the letters from Adams Elementary School, we are able to take that information, kind of compile their ideas and their thoughts. We're able to communicate with our students over the possibilities of what they were asking for. You know, students at that age, they dream big. So currently our students are still in the process of learning how to read a tape measure. They're still in the process of learning how to read prints and basic layout of things. Our students are currently learning new power tools, hand tools, and developing, more importantly, they're developing the skills and the know-how to actually operate those tools and equipment. We're going to need to know all of this so we can actually build and create a project for Adams Elementary School. Our expectation with being able to leverage digital is to be able to Skype into a classroom from even one of our job sites, to give a real perspective to these students, not just that they're going to get a new playground, but that they actually could be in this position someday within our Career Center, working with their hands, with their instructor on helping community.
This Monarch migration thing came up, and I kind of liked it because it would cover the whole year. And then I thought it fit in really good with what we do at the end of the year, where they get to watch butterflies grow from caterpillar to an adult butterfly. So in September, we studied a lot about monarch butterflies. We gave them books. They had books on EPIC. They did some of their own exploring and investigating on butterflies. I am excited for them to see how these butterflies connect us to other parts of the world. That's really what I kind of wanted my kids to realize, how important it is to represent ourselves to people that live in other countries. We connect with the class in Mexico is when we get our butterflies back in spring.
Well, there's these certain type of butterflies that migrate down there, monarchs. They always migrate down to Mexico for the winter and come back up here for the summer.
We're gonna get a caterpillar, and we're gonna get our own tank, and we're gonna make the caterpillar grow into a butterfly.
They did really good. I was really impressed at how they worked together, and they figured out how to make sure everybody had a part and got represented. In one of our groups, the book that they were reading was Threats to the Monarch Butterfly. As they were reading that, they realized that if there wasn't milkweed, then the butterflies could not go there after migration. That's the only place that the butterflies will lay their eggs, is on milkweed.
Monarch butterflies lay eggs on milkweed because that's the favorite kind of plant that there's this special oil that makes the butterflies poisonous. So if another animal eats some, they get poisoned. And that's the favorite kind of plant, and that's where you can find a bunch of
This project started as a collaborative effort across the entire fine arts team to help kids think about the Flint, Michigan water problem and how the lead was affecting their water supply. And we wanted to use that as a way to help kids think about our local communities as well as our international communities. So we've been exploring what those effects were socially as well as scientifically, and trying to find artistic ways to bring that home and create ways that kids can be powerful forces in our own communities. Now we enter a phase where the kids are increasingly more in charge of their learning. So they're planning things out. They establish the steps that they need to take, obviously with guidance from their teachers and myself, and their community members that they talk with, their families, other people in the neighborhood, and they set the stage for what they're going to take, what kind of ways they're going to show their learning.
I learned that there's other people in the world suffering right now. Even though you can go to Flint, Michigan right now, there's still lead. So to me, it's kind of sad because right here, we're all peaceful. It's peaceful, we have clean water.
What I'm having students do is think about how they can look at our local community based on what they know about how other water problems have happened around the world as well as Flint, Michigan, and look at our local water supply and look at our marshlands or wetlands, and just anything that they become very passionate about as they learn about the problems that we have here at home. Everything from urban planning to the effects of pollution in our marshlands. And I'm asking kids to develop a way to reach out to their community to either test and experiment with ways to fix it, or develop prototypes of inventions that they think would be useful to solve those problems.
From what I learned from this project is right here in Fort Wayne, Indiana, we have really clean water, but in other parts of the world, they don't have that much clean water.
When I'm asked why I'm so passionate about the work I do personally and the work that all of the people in the Fort Wayne Community Schools do every single day, the answer is really simple. There's no other profession in the world where you get the opportunity to touch the future, change the future by shaping the lives of young people. Most of the things that we work on every single day, we really won't even see the results. because often as you work with young people, it may be 20 years or 30 years down the road for you to actually end up seeing the impact of your work. But what makes me so excited about coming to work every single day is I know that we have all the foundational pieces that we need. Our work on not just the academics, but the whole child, the readiness to learn. And now our focus on those global competencies. We're giving kids all the tools they're going to need to create their own future.
I report to a school board, and we have a great working relationship. But there's a group of folks in this district that everybody knows when they talk, I listen. So I have some representatives come, my student advisory group, hurry up, you're on the stage. Hurry quickly, move, come on. We don't have all night, these people want to go home. Move it, move it, move it. As they're coming, I have 26 student advisory students from the high schools, and there is nothing we do in this district that they don't co-sign, correct, look at. And we have done lots and lots of conversations around deep learning. And so when we are joining the lab and we are looking at deep learning, it's because they've told me what kind of things are missing. So most of you, I hope, are not trying to watch all the impeachment hearings because your brains can fry. But this morning when I was getting ready, I heard a quote from one of the gentlemen who testified yesterday, and I just thought it was the absolute best way to end. He was talking about why he was not afraid to stand up and speak. And he said, "This is America. Right matters." And so I had my students come up because in the Fort Wayne Community Schools, this is the Fort Wayne Community Schools, and we always do what is right for all students. And so I hope you've enjoyed this evening. We are on a high because we think that we can make a difference. We think that we can demonstrate what we do. We think we can keep the promises that they need for us to make. And I cannot tell you how good it feels to look out and see all of you here because I think you believe the same thing. So once again, let's please thank Dr. Fullan, Joanne, Mag. And I'm supposed to say you're dismissed. Thank you.